In Siberia, Joseph Stalin developed the characteristic which was to be one of the essentials of his rise to power: absolute self-sufficiency. He relied on no one but himself, never sharing his inner feelings with his comrades. "A good dose of exile in Siberia never hurt me," he later said. Out of exile for a time in 1905, the wary, watchful provincial radical met the man who would transform his fortunes, Lenin, the Bolshevik leader. Lenin was immediately taken with the rough Georgian.
Stalin appealed to Lenin for a variety of reasons. Firstly, Stalin was one of the few, obviously very able organizers of the Bolshevik Party within Russia. Stalin had a lot of experience in revolutionary underground work. And it was quite natural that Lenin, looking around for people who could be entrusted with responsible functions within Russia, selected Stalin.
Hitler had no such sense of direction. In 1908, he left the small town Austria of his youth and arrived in Vienna to try his luck as an artist. The years that followed were for him what exile in Siberia was to Stalin. "I owe it to that period that I grew hard," he later said. Although Hitler saw himself as an artist, his talent was limited. He applied twice to the Viennese Academy of Arts. Twice he was rejected. It was a bitter blow. "When I received the news," he said, "it struck me like a bolt from the blue." Hitler squandered his mother's inheritance loafing around in Vienna. He spent much time in the Austrian parliament, mainly to keep warm, but also to drink in the rabid nationalism and anti-Semitism current at the time. What he witnessed there gave him a lifelong contempt for democracy. The failed artist sank fast and was forced to seek shelter in a home for vagrants, still open today. It was a crushing humiliation. Shy and solitary, he sat in the same corner of the writing room day after day, drawing and painting.
He never had a real conversation with anyone in the hostel. When he opened his mouth, it was to make a speech, loudly, passionately, speaking down to people and carrying on as if he would never stop. The other people in the hostel would laugh at him. He was a peculiar figure. He was an extreme example of a loner who nonetheless read a lot and learnt a lot.
In winter, Hitler took work shoveling snow, but lacked the coat and the strength to carry on. His destitution didn't do what it had for so many other poor and hopeless men in Vienna and drive him into the arms of the Marxists. Instead, he developed a horror of communism, believing that a man must succeed by his own efforts. To that end, Hitler tried to make a living selling his paintings of Vienna as illustrated postcards. His partners in this doomed enterprise were mostly Jews.
In this kind of atmosphere, he quite clearly latched onto the Jews. He developed close friendships with them and worked together with them. This, however, had nothing to do with his ideology. He had quite clearly learnt the slogans of the anti-Semites in Vienna more or less by heart. He had a phenomenal memory. He didn't just learn these slogans by heart, he learned an awful lot else.
The outbreak of war in 1914 was a turning point for Adolf Hitler, who, in contrast to Stalin, had grown into adulthood a drifter. In August that year, he was captured on film by the photographer Hoffmann in Munich, his new home, rejoicing at the declaration of war. He rushed to enlist.
I am not ashamed to acknowledge that I sank down on my knees and thanked heaven for the favor of being allowed to live at such a time.
Hitler was a regimental runner, taking messages from trench to trench, often under heavy fire. Twice wounded, once gassed, he was awarded the Iron Cross First Class, a high distinction. The war changed him forever.
It created an extraordinary moral blunting, I think, in Hitler. He saw death all around him. He had friends who were killed every single day. I think it created in him almost a desire to steep himself in the atmosphere of death and destruction. And I think we can see very clear links between that extraordinary environment and his willingness later on to embrace policies of annihilation.
I learnt that life is a cruel struggle and has no other object than the preservation of the species, Hitler wrote. For him, morality had no place. Only the survival of the fittest, the German master race, would matter now. Joseph Stalin, unlike Adolf Hitler, did not fight in the First World War. He was rejected by the Russian army as unfit because of his damaged arm and as a political troublemaker. Freed from military service, he pursued his political ambition. He had a clear sense of his historic role, a revolutionary working alongside the party leader, Lenin. In 1917, he went to St. Petersburg after the overthrow of the Tsar in the February Revolution. He took over Pravda, the Bolshevik newspaper, and moved into a flat with the Alleluyev family. In those days, in contrast to Hitler, Stalin was relatively relaxed with women. The daughter of the family soon caught his eye.
It was here, in this flat, that his romance unfolded with Nadezhda, Alleluyev's younger daughter. In time, she was to become Stalin's wife.
Nadezhda was 16 when Stalin arrived at the flat. They married 2 years later. She was a music student and appealed to the Georgian revolutionaries' romantic side.
I know that she loved Tchaikovsky mainly, those children's pieces of Tchaikovsky. The girls were also very fond of Byron's poetry, and so in one of the rooms they hung a portrait of Byron.
Stalin, too, loved Byron's work. As a young man, he had published his own romantic poetry.
When the mountain spring, dammed up, once more sweeps the path away and gushes, and the forest, woken by the breeze, begins to toss and rustle, then I, too, oppressed, find the mist of sadness breaks and lifts, and instantly recedes, and hopes of the good life unfold in my unhappy heart.
Joseph Stalin and Nadezhda Alleluyeva fell in love. Lenin, who had come to value Stalin, was disappointed.
Lenin said to Stalin, "I want you to marry my sister." Stalin said, "I'm sorry, but I have already married Nadezhda Alleluyeva." "What?" said Lenin. "How?" "Just like that." "How did you find the time?" Stalin replied, "We somehow found the time and got married."
Despite the failed marriage bid, Stalin's intimacy with Lenin grew. He had hidden the Bolshevik leader in the Alleluyev flat before the October Revolution and helped him escape to Finland.
Once there was a time where they had to escape. The police wanted to catch Lenin and shoot him as a spy. Granny said that he had to be shaved so as to disguise him, and she wanted to do it. But Stalin said, "I'm a man, I'll shave him better." So he did it, and put a cap on Lenin like the one I'm wearing now. Grandpa gave him a coat and took him to the station.
И повел его к финскому вокзалу.